My name is Michelle Violanti, and I'm an associate professor in communication studies. I've been at the university, this is my 28th year, and I started in arts and sciences, and then we moved over to communication and information, which has been a great move for us. I have to say, I'm really excited to be the end or kind of the bookend for the OLAP showcase this week. It started on Tuesday, and I found it to be extremely beneficial. If you have an opportunity to go back and see any of those sessions, particularly from Tuesday that were recorded, I would highly recommend it. What I'm going to talk to you today about is assessment and making sure that your assessments are accessible to all of our students and that they meet the needs of all of our students. Okay, so the title of the presentation is All-Vol Assessment. And you'll see here on this first slide on the right-hand side, there is an image of stars. So does something get 1 star, 2 star, 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars? You will hear me at various points in time during the course of this presentation describe things that may not be visually accessible to some of our participants. That is part of the UDL process, is making sure that, particularly when we have images or we have information that somebody who has a visual impairment cannot see, we make that accessible to them. So you will hear me describe slides, you will hear me describe different kinds of things as we go along, and that's part of the process. I think we're all pretty familiar with both formative and summative assessments, which are the first 2 bullet points. Formative assessments tend to be those low-stake kinds of things that we do with students to see or mark their progress toward learning. And summative assessments tend to be the ones that we use to determine at the end of some set of information or some set of skills, whether they have accomplished the goals that we set forward for them in that particular amount of time or amount of content. While everything that I talk about today can refer to formative and summative assessments, I'm going to focus primarily on evaluative and reflective assessments. So evaluative and reflective assessments tend to be the kinds of things that we do to see whether our students have achieved larger outcomes. So maybe it's course outcomes, maybe it's program outcomes. And usually when we are doing that, there is some kind of a reflective process, whether that's done by the faculty member or by the students themselves. So when I'm talking about assessment today, I'm really talking about the larger types of assessment that go beyond the formative and summative assessments that we use in our courses. On the next slide, we're going to talk about some of those assessment processes, and the image that is here on the right-hand side for you is a computer screen with Canvas and some of the various things that you can do with Canvas and the tools that are available. Everything that I talk about today can be done within Canvas because that is our learning management system, and I don't want to be using things that are not easily accessible to both our students and to our faculty, and that aren't necessarily supported. One of the things that we tend to have difficulty with, or at least I do, is when somebody gives me this great tool and then I have no background on how to use it. So for example, during the pandemic in particular, people talked about, oh, I used Flipgrid and I used OBS to do my screen captures and my online lectures. But we don't necessarily have the support for all of those different kinds of things. So it's important, I think, to use processes that we can support. So within Canvas, one of the things that I do, and I'll show you how I set this up in my Canvas site after I kind of talk through what's going on, is modalities. My students all have the option to complete assessments in one of 4 modalities. So they can write their responses, they can, in a remote location, they don't have to come into a proctored site to do this, but they can write their responses, they can type their responses, they can audio or video record their responses, Oh, and they can draw or visually represent their responses. And I set all of these up within Canvas and used Proctorio as kind of part of the proctoring process. Not so much because I'm looking to catch them cheating as much as it helps me see what processes they're using as they take the exam. So all of those modalities are available to them for any of the assessments that we complete. Some of the strengths of this process, it allows people to do what works best for them. The majority of my students will still choose to type their answers, but I'm finding more and more people who are experimenting with visual responses as well as recorded responses. Some people just work better when they're talking than they do when they're writing or typing. So this also allows us to address some of the potential problems that students may have in terms of disabilities or just in terms of not necessarily something that goes as far as a disability, but it's still more difficult or challenging for them to do it. So my students, for example, who have motor skills, fine motor skill difficulties, typing is not always easy for them, neither is writing, which is why the recorded response gives them the flexibility to be able to do what's going to work best for them. Now, I would love to tell you that this is all easy and it's fun and games. However, there are lots of challenges associated with providing multiple modalities. First of all, students have to decide before the exam which way they're going to take the exam so that you can set it up correctly within Canvas. The second challenge is that what I'm learning, particularly with our traditional age students, is that they don't like to make decisions. They want somebody to tell them, do it this way and do it only this way because this is the right way to do it. So it does take some practice. And what I try to do to get them more comfortable with the options is to set up small assignments leading up to an exam, for example, that require them to use each of the modalities just so that they can see them and try them out for themselves in the hopes that it will help them make better informed decisions. Another challenge can be technology. I haven't run into this issue as much since we've come back from the pandemic and we have more students on campus and fewer students on the network. I haven't had as many technology issues where people needed more bandwidth than they could get access to. But that is always something to keep in the back of your mind as a potential challenge associated with giving them options in terms of modalities. Once you decide that you're going to engage in this assessment process, you have to figure out what kinds of tools you're going to use. So the next slide is tools. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Canvas, and I'm also going to talk a little bit about Materia, which is an add-on that is available to us in Canvas. So what you see there is one of Materia's kind of logo shots. When we talk about Materia, you can use instructor-generated Materia. And so that would be where I go in and create my own assessments. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of assessments that I have created through Materia to engage students, but also to give them some authentic assessments. So it's putting them in actual situations that they might find themselves in and asking them to kind of work their way through it. And it's done through what we call Choose Your Own Adventure, which reminds me of those books that we read growing up. Maybe you didn't read them, but I did, where you would get to the bottom of a page and says, if you want to do this, go to page this. And if you want to do this, go to a different page. And that's kind of what this allows you to do within the online environment. The other thing that we don't see done as often, but can be just as valuable, is student-generated materia or assessments. where they're creating the assessment. One of the things that we know is students who can teach material to others have clearly learned the material. So setting up situations where they're able to create something that would be used or could be used to teach other students about a particular topic is also beneficial for doing assessment. It also allows them to use tools that make sense to them. Flashcards don't necessarily work for me, but for some students, they're extremely beneficial. I get bored with flashcards relatively easily, and so that's why I don't personally use them. But I've certainly seen my students use them in good and strong ways to demonstrate knowledge. Okay, so this is my current Canvas site, and I've taken material off it for the time being, just so that I can show you how to stick it in there if you haven't done this before. So if you scroll down in your site to settings and go to navigation and scroll down to the very bottom, Materia is there and you can enable it. And once you save it, it will appear on your right hand or on your left hand side navigation as an option. Now, when you go to Materia, it actually takes you to a new site. Oh, whoa. Before we go to Materia, let me at least show you how I set up the exam. Sorry, my mistake. I was ahead of myself. Okay, so exam one, you have exam one type. Some students prefer to come to campus and do that, and that's fine. I will allow them to do that. I choose a room on campus, usually in our office, if they want to do that. And then we have same exact exam, remotely proctored on Proctorio, which is the typed version and the recorded version. So when I click on these, they're all done through Canvas quizzes. They all look the same, and they're all set up with questions that look exactly the same. So they have their boxes. I love Canvas when it's simple, not always. So they all see exactly the same directions. They all see the same questions. And those who are recording have the option to upload a file. Those who are typing have a box in which to do their typing. Those who are drawing have a place to upload their images, and those who are writing take a picture of their written responses and they upload those as well. So the quizzes or the tests themselves pretty much work exactly the same way through the Canvas quizzes option. Now my favorite part. So when you click on Materia, it takes you here and it gives you the option to make your own widgets. As you can see, I am on a laptop. If you are on a larger screen, you would not have to do anywhere near as much scrolling as I do. But on a 13-inch screen, not everything fits super well. And so when we get into Materia, they have examples of all of the different types of what they call widgets that you can use. The two that I'm going to show you today are Adventure up here, which I call Choose Your Own Adventure, with respect to scenarios. And then the other one that I'm going to show you is called Sort It Out. And that is a sorting game for the students. We have an assessment in our program where students need to be able to attach theories to their philosophical perspectives. And so basically at the end of the semester, I send them to this widget. It is ungraded because it's used only for program assessment purposes. And they go through and they sort it out, and whatever score they get is what gets recorded for our SACS assessment in particular. Some of you may also have professional accreditation assessments that you need to do, and this is a place that you can do that in a way that's a little bit more engaging than just a traditional Canvas quiz. And so for your purposes, I'm just going to kind of give you the preview version. It shows you everything about it. And when the students go in, it shows them how to play before they actually get started. And there is both an audio and a visual version of how to play. So what you can see here are, I have created cards, and each card has both the name of the theory and a visual to go with it. And the reason that I do this is because some people can remember things visually better than they can remember them textually. And so this gives them more opportunities to see what's there. And then down at the bottom are the 3 perspectives, and they have to get everything into the correct folder, is essentially what it boils down to. I'm just going to put them in folders so you can see what it looks like without probably getting very many of them right. And this, I believe this particular one also has keyboard options for students so that they can so that rather than dragging and dropping, they have the option to put them into the folders with keystrokes, which are easier for our students, particularly our students who use boards, whether they're talk boards or special keyboards. And then at the end, it says you've done all of the pieces, and it gives you the option to submit. And as you can see, when you don't pay attention to what you're doing, you don't always do very well. Canvas gives you the option to, if you want this to be a graded assignment, to bring it in as completed or not completed, or to bring it in as an actual score. For our purposes, when we're doing assessment for the program, we're not as concerned about giving them credit for it. So it's usually a 0-point complete, not complete assignment. If we're worried that they're not going to complete it, we might make it a 1-point assignment or an extra or a bonus point kind of assignment. But that's the sorted out option within Materia. Okay, the other widget that I want to show you is probably my favorite accomplishment as in terms of designing online coursework. And I have to give a big shout out to Chris Emberton, because it was based on the interactive activity that she created for my Jumpstart course that I came in here to do this kind of as the follow-up to what she had created. So I am eternally grateful to her for pushing me to even try something like this. So what you'll see when you go in here, I'm going to show you the edit version first, just so that you can get a feel for what happens. It essentially creates what is now a very small hidden decision tree, which starts kind of at your scenario. And then each time students have the opportunity to choose something else or to choose their own version of the adventure, it branches off for them. And then the yellow dots are the information you present to them. The green dots are where they have the option to do something. And the red dots are the bottom, where it tells them how well they did or how poorly they did, as the case might be. So I will walk you through my adventure. So this adventure starts off with a manager and an employee who are in a conflict. And it shows an image of kind of a workplace environment where there might be a large meeting going on. And Latoya and Peyton are the two people in our conflict. So it just kind of lays out for you the nature of the workplace environment, and then kind of what leads to the conflict. So Peyton must decide how to respond to the situation, and she must choose A, B, or C to be able to respond to Latoya. And so a little bit later, probably a week later, Latoya responds with, paying overtime is less expensive than paying benefits for additional employees. You should be happy you have a job with benefits. And so it continues on and asks, well, how should Peyton respond to Latoya given that? And so Peyton chooses, and again, there is a third interaction between Latoya and Peyton about working overtime. And once again, Peyton must respond to Latoya. When we get to the end of a decision tree, it gives the students the option to then find out how well they did or how poorly they did with respect to that particular situation. So in this case, when we scroll down and continue after we have gotten the feedback, it tells us that we didn't do so well. And the previous paragraph or comment is what gives the students the information then about why it was not considered well. You can set it up where they can have unlimited attempts so that they can go through a series of options. You can set it up where it, again, records completed, incomplete, or what the actual score is. It can record the best score if that is what you would prefer. So it gives you some options as the instructor to make decisions about what's going on. And if you simply want it to be an informational assessment, you can certainly do that as well. Trying to think if there's anything else I need to tell you about. Oh, that's the other thing. So the more things that they do poorly, the more decisions they typically end up with. And that's simply because you're trying to push them in some ways toward stronger answers. So on this particular choose your own adventure, they can score between 60% and 100%. If they make all good decisions about their responses from a communication perspective, they score 100%. Every time they kind of waffle or they choose things that might not be considered competent communication, that brings their score down. And as you saw, that particular combination was the worst of the scores in terms of what happened there. The last thing that I wanted to show you is kind of a student-generated material. You can also put assignments into Canvas so that the students have to go and create materials. And so you can give them options to work with the ones that make the most sense to them. I like Enigma, which is a Jeopardy based, because if you give them kind of, these are the answers, now you have to write the questions that go with them, that will tell you something about their learning. The other one that works pretty well for students to do as assignments for them or assessments for them is flashcards. but I don't do definitions on my flashcards. I give them the key terms and they have to generate flashcards with examples of those key terms. And this works across a variety of disciplines because just about any of the key terms, whether you're in English or you're in engineering or you're in business or you're in social work or you're in the law school, if you don't have an example, then knowing the term or the definition isn't going to be overly helpful. So this is another opportunity to get them to think at a higher level in terms of your assessments rather than being down at the lowest levels of learning. This pushes us up a little bit higher into the potentially application level of Bloom's taxonomy, if that is something that is of interest to you.